Welcome to Boston Asian American Film Festival's Filmmaker Q&A for the Shorts Block Queer and Here, featuring Dancing on My Own. I'm Kathy Yao, and I'm a member of the screening committee, and I have the honor of moderating today's conversation. I'm so happy that with us today is Ali Cuerdo, director of Dancing on My Own. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you so much. It's so awesome to be back and part of the BAAFF family again. It was so fun. We came here for the first time a few years ago with my first film, Ulam, which was the crazy Filipino food doc.
That's right. That's right. We're so glad to have you back, even if virtually this time. Do you have any other Boston connections?
You know, I have a best friend that lives there, but outside of that, it was really one of my first times really hanging out in the city the last time I came for Ulam. And it was, honestly, it was so dope. It was so much fun. And actually so fast to get to because I live in New York primarily. So it's just a hop, skip, and a jump over. And yeah, I had a great time.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we're happy to have you back, and hopefully next time you're here, we can actually do things in person and show you around the city.
Yes, please, please.
So I have to say that you had me at Dancing on My Own. I mean, I saw the title and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the queer anthem by queer icon herself, Robin. And it was as fabulous as I expected it to be.
Oh, thank
You know,
you.
Dancing on My Own is described as a love letter to the queer Asian experience inspired by New York's radical dance party, Bubble Tea, which I feel like maybe is different from Ulam.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
How different was that experience? I'm creating Dancing on My Own and talking and interviewing to the fierce and fabulous interviewees.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you know what's funny about the two films is actually I feel they are so similar in some ways. I feel like for me as a director and as a writer, I'm always trying to figure something out about myself every time I make a movie. And so Ulam, you know, was me, I think, exploring what my Filipino-ness was, you know, and what being a Filipino American meant. And the vehicle I chose was sort of a food documentary because food is so central to Filipino culture. But for Dancing on My Own, it was very much about exploring this intersection of what does it mean to be Asian and what does it mean to be queer, and how do those things meet, and can they exist together? And so, you know, these were a lot of the questions that I had just growing up, and I really came face to face with them when I went to this radical dance party called Bubble Tea.
And you interview so many prominent Asian Americans in the film, from the founders of Bubble Tea to Bowen Yang, who I believe is a writer for Saturday Night Live. Yeah. So
Yeah, writer and cast member now.
excellent. So what was the process for selecting the interviewees, and how did it feel to talk to so many Asian American cultural icons?
I mean, honestly, it is such a privilege to be able to do this work for our community, and also for, you know, really like with our community. A lot of the people that helped make this are also part of the Bubble Tea family, a part of my filmmaker community in New York. And it's, I gotta tell you, it's the best experience to make a movie with all of your friends, especially starring all of your friends. It makes it feel less like you're selecting people to be in front of the camera and just kind of pointing the camera, you know, when it moves you. I think like that's something to me that's so fun about documentary, is being able to really like, we were in a 4-story rave and we were able to really capture that moment and capture the queens that were there and their energy, you know, that I think that's my favorite part of this filmmaking process, is the fact that I got to document something that I love, you know, and so it didn't really feel like work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And community is certainly a shared theme among the other shorts in the program. Um, Aside from Bubble Tea, were there any, or are there any queer spaces that were, you know, formative for you?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, just in New York alone, bubble tea isn't the only sort of like queer POC party. One that I really admire is called Poppy Juice. Just an amazing space for Latinx, POC, really like, I mean, really everybody, but it's such a fun party every time. Another one that's amazing is thrown by a friend, a chef named Angela de Mayuga, and it's a lesbian underground rave called Gush. Also one of my favorite spaces. And
Is it still around? Is
I mean, all of these things have kind of been put on pause because of COVID, and it's hard, honestly. Like, what is nightlife now? you
right?
know like it's funny because this film, in a way, when I made it, I was like, oh, this is just a love letter and a celebration of what is here and what will always be here. But at a certain point, you look back on the insane dumpster fire that 2020 has been, and you think about, like, well, will this ever look the same again? I don't know. What does community really look like for us now? Right now, a lot of it's online, which is awesome. But I know that there has been this feeling of isolation because we're not able to gather in those same physical spaces.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of imagine a new community? How do we imagine a new world? Some of the questions I'm thinking about recently.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you still in touch with some of the folks that you interviewed?
Yeah. So luckily we've been all pretty in touch throughout this pandemic. We did a thing over Asian Pacific Heritage Month. That was kind of like a weekend of like bubble tea, AAPI programming. Some of us had cooking shows. There were drag shows. So there are ways that we're trying to kind of stay connected online, and doing, like, masked, socially distanced hangouts in person. But it's one of those things that it's like, for the community, I've been hearing so many wonderful things about people who've seen this film, because they're like, man, I miss that, like, that's what I remember. And I never thought that this film would become a documentation of like that joy. And it helps, it helps to remember that it wasn't always this terrible.
No, it's funny you say that because I was watching it and I was like, oh, I would love to go dancing right now. I haven't had playing here.
Right, like, you want to listen to that Robin song right now.
Yes, I just listened to it actually. And I think that's what makes your documentary, the film, so important right now, because like you said, you really are documenting something that hopefully will continue when we come out of the pandemic, but it can
Yeah.
certainly serve as a healing virtual space right now. Yeah.
Yeah, just a hug. That's all I want to. I feel like that's what our community needs, and really what the world needs right now.
Yeah. Well, and it was created it was after the 2016 election,
Yes.
and as a space that was lacking for queer Asians.
Yes, and for, I mean, honestly, for Asian Americans, I mean, when was the last time you went to a club and saw a majority Asian American folks? I mean, it's very rare in nightlife, and I think it's one of those things that just needed to happen, like, sometimes it feels, I mean, as an Asian American person myself, sometimes it feels nice to just look around and see other people like you. It just, I don't know, in a chaotic world, I feel like there's so much comfort in that, sort of identifying as part of something greater.
Yeah. Well, visibility is another theme that the shorts address. An example is it's called About a Film, and it's about and by a queer Canadian musical comedian, I believe is how he describes himself. And he addresses a lack of visibility of Asians in media and entertainment, in theater, through satire. And I actually came across something you said at a panel on entrepreneurship about the power of media. And you said, power of media, it's the way we can shape the hearts and minds of the future. What we consume, what we see is who we believe we can become. is just so beautifully said. Do you see queer Asian visibility in media changing?
I do, and I'm so here for it. Honestly, I am ready. You know, I am ready for that lead in Gossip Girl to be a trans Asian female. I am ready for that. You know, I'm ready for 80 more seasons of Pose. You know, it just really feels like we are right there. You know, we are pushing, and honestly, it feels really reassuring at the end of the day that it's not like it's just me or my friends or my community. I'm seeing this new wave of artists and filmmakers and creators that are really being unapologetic, you know, that are kind of looking around and seeing that, well, there's a gap in the content. You know, there are whole audiences that are not being served. So how do we fill that need? You know, and at the same way, like, how do we also be honest as artists and express, you know, sort of our influences and what we grew up with? I mean, and I think that the fact that Hollywood is changing and becoming more diverse, and I mean, it's such a good thing. You know, I really don't see a downside to including more perspectives in the conversation.
Yeah. And I think what goes along with that, and what you've done so well, and what really all the shorts in the program do so well, is that storytelling is it's nuanced, and it's done in compassionate ways, um, and you know, it's from the perspective of queer Asian people. Um,
Isn't that refreshing?
and it's kind of like, why are we even having this conversation? Because
Yeah.
that's the way it should be, right?
Right. It should just be a given that this exists. But how great is it too that there's a whole section, right? Just for this. It's not just one film in one festival somewhere.
In your experience, in your filmmaking or just creative experience, have you had conversations with maybe white producers or white or non-Asian writers who are sort of pushing back against having these nuanced ways of telling our stories?
I mean, I think that I can tell you this, the world changed radically this summer in terms of the kinds of conversations that I was having and the kinds of rooms that I've been allowed into. It's so fascinating. And I've spoken to a lot of other, you know, female directors and peers about this seemingly massive shift. I think it sort of began with the Me Too movement, and it began with Black Lives Matter. And I think it's become this ripple effect really throughout our industry and many other industries, in which for the very first time, I think it is actually seen as a benefit to be a minority. It is a benefit to be a woman. It is a value add to have a POC perspective. Like, that is amazing. And the fact that executives of, you know, all races and genders are waking up and saying, hey, I'm looking around and I'm seeing a bunch of people that only look like me. Let's you know, add more seats to the table. You know, I think that is something that has happened, especially this year, because there has been this reckoning and awakening. Thank goodness, finally. And it's good, because it means that now people like me are being given a shot. You know, I know that, you know, oftentimes one of the questions is, what's next? You know, and for me, you know, it's been a huge privilege. I'm on a show right now, and I just directed Meryl Streep for the first time. I mean, it's like, pinch me, you know, it's moments like that where I know that all of this work has been building to something, you know, and it means that, you know, the more that I can see myself having a path in this industry, the more I believe that the industry is changing, and for the better.
You did take one of my questions. Yeah, but that's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, how is Meryl these days?
Oh, Meryl's a gem. She's, I mean, as anyone who has worked with her, which I am so lucky to say now that I have, she's super classy, super professional, just a wonderful lady. And we were so lucky to shoot with her because she, in the midst of a pandemic, comes down into the studio. So that was really impressive. And so that was for a new project I'm working on called the International Press Freedom Awards for NBC. And it is, I think, an award show for all the right reasons. It awards journalists all over the world who are on the cutting edge, breaking news stories, even against their government's wishes, and often, being threatened with imprisonment and death. So it's a show that celebrates journalists and the people that are bringing us the real news. So I'm proud to be directing it.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in these times.
Yeah, it's all we have, right?
So I want to pivot back to Dancing on My Own. In the film, we are introduced to you, and we sort of see your journey, your coming out journey. And one of the things I love is seeing you talk with your mom. So I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about the evolution of your relationship with both your mom and your family, because I know that they're a religious family.
Right.
So yeah, just tell us a little bit more about that relationship.
Sure. I mean, it's so interesting that you ask that, because that's a part of the film that I think I never intended when I wanted to make it. Initially, I was like, oh, I'll make a documentary about this great group of people, happen to be my friends, called Bubble Tea. Let's do that. I think there's a temptation as an artist to let the work speak for itself and kind of never put yourself in the work. Of course, I broke all of those rules on this one because I am in the film, and I do come out to my mom on camera again. We tried not to make it too Oprah, but it was really, it was kind of a moment where I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this, and and it's funny, the reason I was even on camera was the entire film was financed by this really awesome grant called the Visco Voices Artist Grant, and it was given to 5 artists that year who were doing a project based on an underrepresented community, and so of course I'm doing the Queer Asian project to underrepresented communities. So through the grant process, one of my advisors was sort of asking me about what the film was about. And in that, they were like, oh, okay, so it's about this dance party that changed your life. Sure. But why are you not in it? Why, if it changed your life and it's important to you, why can't you be a part of the story? And that was really surprising to me. It was something that I had never considered, and I thought about it for a long time. And that weekend I had planned on seeing my parents. And so I brought the pitch to my mom, and I had her read the pitch for the short film. And that was, one of the first times I've really ever shared work of mine with my parents, especially in such early stages. And she read it, and it sparked this whole conversation that ended up actually healing years of never talking about these difficult things, and that was amazing. That was actually the first time that I felt like the art I was making had kind of snuck into my own life and really changed my life. And that was a surprise to me. And that was the thing that made me realize, okay, maybe I should listen to my advisors and maybe this is really important, because I think that for me, when making movies, I never really want them to just be my own sort of trauma or my own experience or just one perspective. I think that films at the end of the day are about connecting. I think they're about figuring out how we connect as human beings. And so to show me as a character connecting with Bubble Tea, the community, I felt that was authentic. So that's why I'm in the movie. Long story short, it was, I'll never do it again, but.
You don't think so? Well, I mean, like, you're right. It was so authentic. It felt organic. It was so relatable, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what has been your family's and your mother's reaction to the film?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So my dad watched it, said nothing for 60 seconds, and then cried for 3 minutes. So I think that's 2 thumbs up. My mom watched it when I wasn't with her, but later called me on the phone and told me how proud she was of me, which as an Asian child, I felt like I was like, did I just die and go to, is this really happening? It was, top 10 moments of 2020. So yeah, so I mean, honestly, like it's been great. The reaction has been so lovely, and I am so proud to now have a mom who will sort of very forcefully tell cousins and aunties and uncles that she has an LGBT child and she's cool with it. So that is really cool.
That's awesome. I love that. Um, I wonder if mental health is also something that is touched upon in some of the films, and I wonder if you could talk about the role that a place like Bubble Tea plays in the well-being of a community, of a queer Asian community. And have you ever had any of those conversations with the folks that you interviewed about mental health?
Yeah, I mean, what a great question. And yes, the answer is yes. Spaces like this are central. I think it's a common thread in, for some reason, a lot of queer people's experience in which we didn't really grow up being celebrated. I think we sort of grew up existing against all odds, and kind of fighting to exist. And I think that that's just a function of the world we still live in, and that's just how it is. But I think that is why a space like Bubble Tea, in which you are centered, you are who this is for. That is really what is so special about it, because it's for you. It's maybe the one thing on this planet, in this insane universe, that is made for you. And I think that is a privilege and an experience that a lot of queer Asian Americans have not had. I mean, I certainly have not had a space that I feel, I think Bowen said it in the movie. He's like, it's just amazing how much I relate to everything. And it's exactly true. It's like, it almost feels like uncanny when you walk in and you're like, oh, I love that. I love that. I love this. Like the images that you see, the visuals, the way people are dressed, the culture of it. It's such a kind crowd, everybody's still there to dance and let their hair down, but there's this like understanding, and people take care of each other, and there is this feeling of family. So different, I think, than the words you usually hear to describe a dance party.
Yep. Well, I think that is the perfect note to end on, and we'll all be hopeful that we go to Bubble Tea when the pandemic is over. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much to our guest, Ali Cuerdo, for such a fun and wonderful conversation.
You are so welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. And don't forget to cast your audience vote for the Audience Choice Award by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen. Spread the word and love for queer and here. Thank you all for joining us today.